On a sunny day, you walk by your local camera store and see that they have this lens on display, and you decide to pay them a visit to see if you can try a few test shots. To your surprise, the salesperson immediately starts to talk you out of this lens. He starts out with the argument that this lens is big and heavy, you will never bring it on a hike or bike, and that you will find it sitting on the shelf most of the time. Further, this lens is very expensive. It was $2,400 back when it was new, and the used copy he has on display is still more than $1,000, and that you can buy a lot of vintage glass for that kind of money. He continues arguing that the f4 version can do almost the same. It is much cheaper and much lighter, and that modern sensors really don't need as much light, and therefore f2.8 constant aperture is absolutely unnecessary. And while we're at it, why not get the 28 to 300mm lens? It is much more versatile than the limited 70 to 200mm range. And finally, as he pushes you out the door, he tells you that he has joined a religious sect that believes that modern glass with more than 7 elements can never give you 3D pop and stellar micro contrast, and therefore this lens with 21 elements in 16 groups will give you flat and overprocessed light. So, a bit puzzled, you walk home to Google some reviews. So back home with a good cup of coffee, you start to Google reviews, and like all of us, you start with the conclusions. First, you notice that the otherwise cool, calm and collected DxO Mark called this one hell of a lens. Strong language, considering it's not the angry photographer. Next, you turn to Uncle Rockwell and sees that he finds the lens to be excellent, although he prefers smaller and lighter primes. And finally, you read DP Review that this is one of the most accomplished lenses of its type and assign a gold award. So you wonder what went wrong with the sales rep in the local camera store. We shall return to him later. For now, let me take you through the lens review laundry list and give you my observations for each of these points. If you can read an MTF chart, then you will see that this lens has stellar sharpness and contrast. I have done a bit of non-scientific testing in my basement, making the lens compete with the 180mm f2.8 prime. And as you can see, only wide open the prime wins, otherwise the zoom comes out on top. If I test the zoom against itself at different apertures, then the wide comes out as the winner in most cases. But notice that this is the exact opposite of what the MTF chart shows, which I interpret so that we're dealing with very small margins and that the differences I am able to spot is only of interest to pixel peepers. I think it's safe to say that this lens has excellent sharpness and contrast, full stop, end of story. I often get questions why I don't comment on color rendition or color science when I review lenses and cameras, and the answer is that I have seen the eye-opening video by Tony Northrup, where he documents that most of us are unable to consistently pick our favorite camera in a blind test, and that we are more influenced by brand loyalty when assessing color rendition, and that your white balance settings are much more important. Link above. So that is why I'm hesitant to cover this subject. For this lens, I will say that when I put it in front of my D4 body, the pictures and colors it produces are absolutely stunning, which I also hope these pictures here document, despite YouTube compression and whatnot. If you want to have a closer look, I have a Flickr album with these pictures, link in the description. There you will also find the EXIF information, but please have a look at the pictures first and foremost, and not the EXIF information. I hope this doesn't make you feel seasick, but I wanted to show you how fast and silent the autofocus is. The sound on the video is louder than what I hear in real life. It is not as blazing fast as some of my Fuji lenses, but these are APS-C ones, so there's less glass to move, and hence the compare is probably not fair. I find the autofocus on this lens to be fast and silent, and it is so fast that I do not use the option to limit the autofocus range from 5 meters and out. Only if you are an extremely nerdy guy like me that likes to shoot lampposts at night, you will sometimes experience the autofocus gives up in low light and you have to switch to manual. But for most normal users, the autofocus simply just works. Fast, silent and reliable. I don't have much to say about the vibration reduction other than it works. I've been shooting at 200mm down to 1/80th of a second, with no camera shake, and it works in a way so I don't notice it is on. Please don't ask me about video, it's not my thing. I'm not a big fan of the Sunstar this lens produces. I think they look busy or messy. If instead you look at the Sunstars produced by the 180mm f2.8 lens, you can see that the Sunstar looks much more structured or clean. And I think this comes down to the blade design. If you have rounded blades, I think it becomes difficult to make a good Sunstar. On the other hand, if you have straight blades, then your bokeh becomes a little bit edgy. Fully open, this lens of course delivers bokeh as we would expect it, but also when you stop down, and I think this has to do with the rounded lens design. But also in real life, I think this lens delivers. I leave it to you to decide if you can see onion rings or nervousness, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm a happy camper when it comes to bokeh and this lens. Here I turn the focus ring in manual focus mode. I do not touch the zoom ring, it is at 200 mm. Notice how the angle of view changes as I focus towards infinity and back again. I'm sorry the footage is not world class, but I think it illustrates the point. The former version of this lens and the successor has much less breathing, as does the f4 version. So if you are into focus stacking or a videographer, then this could be an issue for you. This version of the lens is known to have both vignetting and distortion under very good control, and apparently the engineers at Nikon did a really good job here. However, I do see some big shifts when I push the profile compensation button in Lightroom, but it's not an issue as such. Just interesting to see how big the change is at several apertures. I doubt you will be shooting architecture or other things with this lens where straight lines are important. If you follow my channel, you will know that I shoot a lot into the sun, and hence both flare and ghost often materialize. I find that both flare and ghost are well controlled with this lens, and often to such an extent that even when it's visible in the picture, either I don't notice or it is not a disturbing element. Much, however, is still dependent on the lens hood and the photographer's skills, but this lens gives you all that modern technology has to offer in terms of minimizing flare. So aberrations are well controlled with this lens, but I have found an example for you where they are not so well controlled. You can see here top left, it looks like the cloud, the white cloud here is almost pink. And I hope that is very visible in the YouTube version. If I click the lens corrections, you can see that it disappears, right? Now it turns white. I have actually had to both go in the profile correction and also go in with this little color selector and point to the aberrations in order to get Lightroom to remove it. I have shot perhaps around 2,000 pictures with this lens, and I think I have found, maybe 2-3 examples of aberrations. So I wouldn't say this is a big issue, but it just goes to show that even a lens with this modern construction can show aberrations, as I'm showing you here. Not a biggie, and I think you can easily fix it in Lightroom, and it occurs very seldom. So I wouldn't be too worried about chromatic aberrations in this lens. So what was it about this grumpy salesman? Well, the story is that his boss had told him just before you stepped into the shop, as a bonus, his bonus for that year, he could pick any one thing from the display. And of course he wanted this lens. So when you stepped into his shop and tried to have a look at the lens and potentially buy it, he of course got very nervous that the lens he had put his eye on was the one you were going to buy. My overall conclusion is that this lens probably is as good as it gets when we are talking lenses where the price point is within reach for normal human beings. Is it a perfect lens? No. You can find things that are not perfect, for example the focus breathing. But it is a lens where I find that Nikon has made some very good compromises that add up to a very attractive package. I can fully understand why working Nikon professionals 10 years ago had this lens sitting on the cameras. It is a pleasure to work with, it gets the job done. The vibration reduction just works silently in the background. The autofocus is fast and reliable. It produces great images. My advice to you is, other than check out the alternatives like Sigma and Tamron, to consider the point the grumpy salesman made. They were not half bad. If some of those points resonate with you, I suggest you look at alternatives with more reach, lighter lenses, or maybe some primes. This is exactly why I cannot help you, as only you know your personal preferences. This shoe fits my foot well, but that does not mean it will fit your foot well. I hope this video has brought you closer to this good lens and what it's like to own it and work with it. Please leave questions in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them. As always, happy shooting, take care, bye bye.